All right, so today we're diving into a story that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
ransomware investigations that uncover global money laundering networks, and there are ties to drug cartels.
Wow.
And get this, even Russian espionage.
I am intrigued. Tell me more.
So it all starts with the UK's National Crime Agency, the NCA, and they're just trying to track down cryptocurrency payments that are linked to a ransomware group.
Okay, so ransomware, that's basically where hackers lock up your computer systems and demand payment to unlock them, right?
Exactly, and this particular group is called Ryuk.
Ah, yeah, Ryuk. I've heard of them. They're notorious for targeting businesses and organizations.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
No, they are not.
So the NCA is on the case, and they start following the money trail, expecting to find, what, a couple $1 million, maybe?
Yeah, usually that's the kind of ransom payments you see with these groups.
But what they found was truly staggering.
What was it?
The sheer volume of money moving through this network was in the billions?
Billions with a B.
Billions with a B.
Wow, that's next level.
Right. Okay, so I'm picturing the NCA finding the ransomware masterminds, sipping cocktails on a private island somewhere.
That's a nice image, but that's not quite what happened.
Ow.
The trail actually led to two Russian businesses, Smart and TGR Group.
Okay, so we're not talking about some shady hacker in a basement. This is a sophisticated operation.
Right, and both of these businesses were operating out of Moscow.
So Russia's involved.
Interesting. Yeah, and Smart in particular was headed by Ekaterina Zanova.
Who's that?
Well, she was a prominent figure in Russian business circles.
Okay, so this is getting more and more intriguing.
It is. As the NCA dug deeper, they started to realize that these companies weren't just laundering money for ransomware gangs.
What else were they doing?
They were cleaning dirty money from all sorts of criminal enterprises.
Like what?
We're talking drug trafficking, sanctions, evasion, all sorts of things.
So it was like a one-stop shop for criminals who needed to clean their dirty cash.
You could say that.
But how did the NCA connect this massive international operation back to something happening on the ground, in the UK?
Well, it all started with a simple arrest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they arrested a cash courier.
What's a cash courier?
Basically, they're individuals who move large amounts of physical cash around to be converted into cryptocurrency.
Oh, okay, so they're like the middlemen in this whole scheme.
Exactly.
So who did they arrest?
They caught a guy named Fawad Saidi.
And where did they catch him?
They got him on a motorway with 250,000 pounds in cash.
Caught red-handed.
Absolutely. This happened back in November 2021.
Wow, talk about a lucky break for the investigators.
It was a game changer. Saidi's arrest directly linked him to Smart's leader, Zdanova.
Oh, wow, so now there's a direct connection back to Russia.
Exactly, and it confirmed that this cash for crypto scheme was operating right within the UK.
So this seemingly small arrest suddenly blew the whole case wide open.
It did. The NCA realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger than they initially thought.
So what do they do with this new information?
They started digging. They used Saidi's arrest like a loose thread, and they pulled on it.
And what did it unravel?
This entire network. They discovered that another individual, Nikita Krasnov, was coordinating these cash couriers all across the UK.
So Krasnov's like the middle manager.
Exactly. And all of these couriers were reporting back to Zadona in Russia.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this whole web gets so tangled.
Yeah.
Couriers moving cash. Krasnov coordinating, Zdanova calling the shots from Russia.
It's a complex operation for sure.
But how does the money actually get laundered? Where does cryptocurrency fit into all of this?
That's a great question, and it's where the case takes a really fascinating turn.
I'm all ears.
Cryptocurrency plays a key role in facilitating these illicit financial flows.
How so?
Well, it allows criminals to move vast sums of money across borders very quickly and cheaply.
And I'm guessing with a lot less scrutiny than traditional banking methods.
Get it. It provides a level of anonymity that traditional financial systems just can't match.
So it makes it much harder for law enforcement to track the money.
It does. Think of it like this. Traditional money laundering is like trying to move a giant boulder. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it leaves a clear trail.
They're following you.
But cryptocurrency, it's like transforming that boulder into a swarm of tiny, fast-moving particles.
Yes.
It's much harder to track and control.
So cryptocurrency essentially turbocharges this whole criminal enterprise.
Exactly. It allows them to operate at a scale and speed that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this massive money laundering network with deep roots in Russia, connections to drug cartels, and a clever way to move money using cryptocurrency. But I have a feeling the story doesn't end there, does it?
It doesn't. As the NCA continued to follow the money, they stumbled upon something truly shocking.
What was it?
They discovered that this laundering network wasn't just serving criminals, it was also being used to fund Russian espionage operations.
Wait, espionage? Are you serious?
I am. This is where those seemingly separate worlds we talked about really collide.
This is insane. This is way bigger than I ever imagined.
It's a stark reminder that the lines between organized crime and state-sponsored activities can be incredibly blurry.
So this criminal network is laundering money for various criminal enterprises, but they're also potentially funding activities that could threaten national security.
That's the reality we're facing.
Okay, so we've uncovered this massive criminal enterprise, but how do you even begin to tackle something like that? It seems
Yeah.
impossible.
You're right, it's not an easy task. The NCA knew they couldn't just go in guns blazing. They needed a more strategic approach.
So what do they do?
They had to be smart about it. Instead of trying to dismantle the entire operation in one fell swoop, they decided to focus on disrupting specific nodes within the network.
So it was a more targeted approach, like a surgeon performing a very delicate procedure.
Exactly.
Interesting. So what were some of their targets?
Well, one of their first targets was those cash couriers.
Ah, right. They were the ones moving the money around.
Precisely. They were the lifeblood of this money laundering operation, constantly moving cash around to be converted into cryptocurrency.
So by disrupting those cash swaps, they could disrupt the whole operation.
Exactly.
That's brilliant.
The NCA had observed these couriers operating in over 55 locations across the UK and the Channel Islands.
Wow, and they were all coordinating with their Russian-speaking handlers.
That's right.
It makes you wonder how much of this activity just flies under the radar every single day.
It's a sobering thought. By disrupting these cash swaps, the NCA was able to send shockwaves through the network.
So the criminals were suddenly looking over their shoulders, wondering who was watching.
Exactly. And remember, these couriers were servicing all sorts of criminal enterprises, from drug cartels to potentially state-sponsored actors.
Wow, so the impact was widespread.
It was disrupting that flow of cash had far-reaching consequences.
So by targeting those lower-level players, the NCA managed to create a cascade of consequences that impacted the entire network.
You got it. And that was just the beginning. The NCA also had their sights set on the financial infrastructure that enabled this money laundering machine to operate.
We'll have to hear more about that in the next part.
We will. But before we move on, let's take a moment to recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We've seen how a seemingly simple ransomware investigation uncovered a vast criminal network.
That's right. A network with connections to drug trafficking, money laundering, and even espionage.
And we've learned about the crucial role that cryptocurrency plays in facilitating these illicit financial flows.
It's been eye-opening.
Yeah. And we've also seen how seemingly small actions, like arresting a single cash courier, can have a significant impact on disrupting the whole operation.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating and complex case,
It really is.
and there's still so much more to unpack.
I can't wait.
In Part 2, we'll delve deeper into how the NCA targeted the financial infrastructure of this network, and we'll explore the wider implications of this whole investigation.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned.
I will.
So last time we were talking about how the NCA was taking down this massive money laundering network.
Right, by targeting those cash couriers?
Yeah. And disrupting that flow of money. But I'm thinking, what about the money itself? How do you actually go after money that only exists, digitally?
That's where things get even trickier. Remember we were talking about cryptocurrency being like a swarm of tiny particles?
Yeah. Really hard to track.
Well, the NCA had to become experts in tracking those particles.
So they had to become cryptocurrency detectives.
Basically.
Yeah.
It was a steep learning curve for them, but they were up for the challenge.
So how did they do it?
They realized they had to target the places where that digital money was being exchanged, processed.
So instead of going after individual couriers, they went after the systems that made the whole thing work.
Exactly. Think of it like this, cutting off the oxygen to a fire.
Okay, makes sense.
They started focusing on cryptocurrency exchanges, the platforms where people can buy and sell crypto. And they also went after payment processors that were facilitating these illicit transactions.
Oh, so they were trying to cut the criminals off from their money.
Precisely. By working with international partners and using their expertise in blockchain analysis, they were able to identify and shut down accounts that were being used by this network.
Wow, so they basically froze those criminal assets in the digital world.
Exactly. It was a big win for them.
I bet that sent a message to these criminals that cryptocurrency wasn't a foolproof way to hide their money.
Oh, absolutely. It forced them to rethink their strategies and adapt.
And it probably made them pretty nervous.
Most likely. It also showed just how important international cooperation is when it comes to tackling these sorts of crimes.
Right, because criminals don't really care about national borders, do they? Especially in the digital world.
Not at all. The NCA couldn't have done this without collaborating with other agencies around the world, sharing intelligence and coordinating their efforts.
So it was a global response to a global threat.
Exactly. This case is a perfect illustration of how crime has evolved in the digital age.
It's definitely more complex than it used to be.
It is. It's no longer just about, traditional detective work, knocking on doors, interviewing suspects.
Yeah, they need a whole new skill set now.
Right. They need to understand the intricacies of blockchain technology, analyze massive amounts of data work with experts from all sorts of different fields.
It's a whole new ball game.
It is. And Operation Destabilise really shows how law enforcement is changing its approach.
So how do they actually combine the old school detective work with all the new technology?
Well, they used everything from handwritten notes they seized during raids to sophisticated blockchain analysis tools.
Wow, so it was a mix of high tech and low tech.
It was all about connecting the dots and mapping out this huge network.
Sounds like a giant jigsaw puzzle.
It was. And every piece of that puzzle, whether it was a financial transaction, a phone record, a surveillance photo, it all helped them build a complete picture of this criminal enterprise.
So they disrupted the network, squeezed their finances, and gathered tons of evidence.
They did?
What happened next? Did they bring anyone to justice?
Well, remember, the NCA's mandate doesn't cover espionage.
Right.
So they had to hand off that part of the investigation.
But I'm guessing they had some wins along the way.
Oh, they did. They made significant progress with multiple arrests both in the UK and abroad.
Who did they arrest?
They went after key figures in the network, the people responsible for coordinating the cash couriers and laundering the money.
That's good to hear. It sounds like they're holding people accountable.
They are. And the evidence they gathered during Operation Destabilise led to the seizure of millions of pounds in cash and cryptocurrency.
Wow. So they actually took money away from these criminals.
They did. That money can no longer be used to fund illegal activities.
That's a huge blow to the network.
It is. It shows that even in the digital age, crime doesn't pay.
That's a good lesson for anyone to learn.
And beyond those tangible outcomes, Operation Destabilise has had a lasting impact on how law enforcement understands these complex criminal networks.
It's like they've created a roadmap for how to tackle this kind of crime in the future.
Exactly. The intelligence they gathered has helped agencies all over the world identify and target similar networks, leading to more disruptions and arrests.
So this one investigation has had ripple effects across the globe.
It has. It really shows what's possible when agencies work together, embrace innovation, and think outside the box.
I guess you could say this case has changed the game when it comes to fighting global crime.
You could say that, but let's be realistic for a moment.
Okay.
This is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. There are many other criminal enterprises operating in the shadows.
Exploiting vulnerabilities and making money from illegal activities.
Exactly. And that brings up a really important question. What are the bigger implications of Operation Destabilise? What does it say about the state of global crime, and what does it mean for law enforcement?
That's a great question, and I guess we'll have to wait for part 3 to find out.
We will.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Operation Destabilise.
It's been a wild ride, hasn't it?
It really has. We've seen ransomware, money laundering, drug trafficking, even espionage.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it, all the different pieces of this puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now that we're wrapping up, I'm thinking, what are the bigger takeaways here?
Well, I think this case really highlights how interconnected our world is. These things aren't happening in some far-off place. They have real consequences.
So how does this affect me sitting here in my living room just trying to live my life? Like, what does money laundering actually have to do with me?
Think of it this way. The money that was being laundered through this network, it didn't just appear out of thin air.
Right. It came from somewhere.
And it was being used to fund all sorts of other criminal activities.
So we're talking things like drug trafficking, human trafficking, maybe even terrorism.
Exactly. All those things are fueled by these illicit financial flows. And they have a ripple effect across the globe. So even something like a ransomware attack can be connected to something much bigger and more sinister.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how it all ties together. But what can we actually do about it? These criminal networks seem so sophisticated, it's almost like they're always one step ahead.
You're not wrong. It's a huge challenge. But I think Operation Destabilise gives us some clues on how to fight back. For one thing, it shows just how important international collaboration is.
Because criminals don't care about borders, especially in the digital world.
Exactly. And this case proved that agencies need to work together, share information, coordinate their efforts across borders.
So we need a global approach to fighting global crime.
Absolutely. We can't afford to operate in isolation anymore. We need seamless ways to share information, track these financial flows, extradite suspects.
And what about technology? These criminals are always finding new ways to exploit cryptocurrency and other new technologies. How can law enforcement keep up?
That's another big hurdle. We have to invest in cutting-edge technology and develop new investigative techniques to stay ahead of the game. Things like blockchain analysis, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, those are becoming essential tools.
So it's not your grandfather's detective work anymore.
It's not. We need investigators who understand the criminal mind and who are tech savvy.
So almost like a hybrid detective data scientist.
You could say that. But it's not just about having the right tools and expertise. It's also about addressing the root causes that allow these networks to thrive in the first place.
So things like poverty, inequality, corruption.
Exactly. Those are breeding grounds for crime. They make it easy for these networks to recruit, operate.
So this isn't just a law enforcement problem, it's a societal problem.
Exactly. We need a multi-pronged approach that combines law enforcement, social programs, economic initiatives.
So it's about creating a world where these networks have less room to breathe.
Precisely. It's about building a global ecosystem that makes it harder for them to operate. So strengthening regulations, promoting transparency, fostering accountability.
And ultimately making the world a safer place.
Exactly. That's the goal.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step in this fight?
I think Operation Destabilise has shown us what's possible when we pool our resources, when we embrace innovation, when we're not afraid to think differently.
It's a glimpse into the future of crime fighting.
And in that future, data analysis, international cooperation, a holistic approach, those are all key.
It's a future where we all have a part to play.
Here's something to think about. If one ransomware investigation could unravel this huge criminal network, imagine what else is out there lurking in the shadows. It's a call to action for all of us to be more vigilant, more engaged in this fight against global crime.
That's a powerful message to end on. And we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on these challenges and how important it is to work together to build a safer world.